The burning of the Library of Alexandria. The ancient Library of Alexandria in Egypt was once the largest and most significant repository of knowledge in the world. It was repeatedly damaged over centuries, but one of the most destructive events came during Julius Caesar's civil war in 48 BCE. As he set fire to enemy ships in the harbor, the flames spread to parts of the city, including warehouses near the library. The exact scale of loss is debated, but many believe countless scrolls containing irreplaceable scientific, literary, and historical knowledge were destroyed. A tactical fire led to a cultural catastrophe that set back human understanding by centuries. Letting Rome fall. By the 5th century, the Roman Empire had weakened due to political corruption, overexpansion, economic instability, and internal division. In 410 CE, the Visigoths, led by Alaric, sacked Rome, an unthinkable event at the time. The empire's failure to maintain a unified defense, adapt to changing threats, and address internal decay paved the way for its collapse. The fall of Rome plunged Europe into the so-called Dark Ages, a period marked by fragmentation, cultural loss, and centuries of slow recovery. Miscalculating Napoleon's Russian campaign. In 1812, Napoleon Bonaparte invaded Russia with over 600,000 troops, believing he could defeat the Tsar's forces quickly. He failed to account for Russia's vast geography, brutal winters, and scorched earth tactics. Russian forces retreated and burned their own villages and crops, denying supplies to the French. By the time Napoleon reached Moscow, the city was deserted and in flames. His army, exhausted and undersupplied, was forced into a devastating retreat. Fewer than 100,000 soldiers made it back. The campaign marked the beginning of Napoleon's downfall, all sparked by an overconfident and ill-prepared invasion plan, launching the Titanic at full speed. On April 14, 1912, the RMS Titanic was traveling at near maximum speed through iceberg-laden waters in the North Atlantic. Despite receiving multiple iceberg warnings from other ships, the crew maintained speed to stay on schedule. That night, the Titanic struck an iceberg and sank, killing over 1,500 people. Investigations revealed that ignoring the warnings and prioritizing reputation over safety were critical errors. The tragedy became a global symbol of human arrogance in the face of nature. Underestimating trench warfare in World War I. When World War I began in 1914, military leaders across Europe expected a swift, mobile conflict like previous wars. They failed to anticipate how machine guns, barbed wire, and artillery would turn the battlefield into a static, deadly stalemate. Generals ordered massive frontal assaults that resulted in catastrophic losses. The Battle of the Somme alone caused over 1 million casualties. Instead of adapting quickly, many commanders stuck with outdated tactics, prolonging the war and leading to a generation lost in the trenches. Blocking Einstein's asylum request. In the early 1930s, as Adolf Hitler rose to power, Albert Einstein, who was Jewish and outspoken against the Nazi regime, fled Germany. While he eventually found refuge in the United States, some Western European governments initially hesitated or refused to support asylum for exiled intellectuals, fearing political backlash or economic burden. Had Einstein not secured safety in America, he may never have contributed to the Manhattan Project or advanced theoretical physics to the degree he did. The reluctance of governments to act quickly risked losing one of the greatest minds of the 20th century. Miscalculating the Treaty of Versailles. After World War I, Allied leaders drafted the Treaty of Versailles in 1919 with harsh penalties for Germany, including massive reparations, territorial losses, and military restrictions. Many German citizens saw the treaty as a national humiliation. Economic collapse and political instability followed, helping extremist movements gain traction. One of them was the Nazi Party, led by Adolf Hitler. The treaty, intended to secure lasting peace, inadvertently sowed the seeds of the next global war. The mistake lay in prioritizing punishment over stability, delaying evacuation at Dunkirk. In May 1940, German forces rapidly advanced through France, trapping over 300,000 British and Allied troops at the coastal town of Dunkirk. For days, British military leaders debated whether a full evacuation was even possible. Some feared losing precious ships. Only after dire conditions forced their hand did they launch Operation Dynamo, using hundreds of naval and civilian vessels to rescue the stranded troops. The delay cost valuable time and lives. Though the evacuation was ultimately successful, earlier action might have saved more equipment and prevented German consolidation. Ignoring radar in Pearl Harbor. On the morning of December 7, 1941, operating a radar station in Oahu picked up a large group of aircraft approaching from the north. They alerted their superior officer, but he assumed the planes were a group of American B-17 bombers expected from California and dismissed the report. The officer's mistake delayed a military response. Within an hour, Japanese forces attacked Pearl Harbor, destroying battleships, killing over 2,400 Americans, and drawing the United States into World War II. The oversight of a new technology, military radar, cost dearly on that day, overruling weather warnings for D-Day. In June 1944, Allied forces were preparing for the largest amphibious invasion in history. Meteorologists warned that storms over the English Channel made June 5th too risky for a landing. Some generals wanted to proceed anyway, fearing further delay would jeopardize the operation. Supreme Commander Eisenhower sided with Stagg and postponed the invasion to June 6th. The weather cleared just enough, and the landing succeeded. Had the earlier date been chosen, the invasion might have ended in disaster due to poor visibility, high surf, and rough winds. A single weather call changed the course of the war. Mao Zedong's Great Leap Forward. In 1958, Chinese leader Mao Zedong launched the Great Leap Forward, a campaign to rapidly industrialize the country and increase agricultural production. The policy forced millions into communal farms and backyard steel furnaces. Officials reported inflated crop yields to meet unrealistic quotas, leading to widespread food shortages. When the state collected grain based on those false figures, rural communities were left to starve. Between 1959 and 1961, an estimated 15 to 45 million people died in what became one of the deadliest famines in human history. The campaign's failure stemmed from authoritarian control, false data, and ideological blindness. The Challenger launch decision. On January 28, 1986, NASA's Space Shuttle Challenger broke apart 73 seconds after liftoff, killing all 7 crew members. Engineers from Morton Thiokol, the company that built the shuttle's solid rocket boosters, had warned that low temperatures that morning could cause the rubber O-rings to fail. Despite this, NASA management decided to proceed with the launch due to public pressure and schedule constraints. The O-rings did fail, leading to a fuel tank explosion. The Rogers Commission later identified communication failures and a culture that prioritized timelines over safety. One flawed launch decision exposed systemic weaknesses within NASA. Overconfidence at Chernobyl. On April 26, 1986, during a late-night safety test at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine, operators deliberately disabled critical safety systems to simulate a power outage. Engineers ignored protocol, failed to understand the reactor's instability at low power, and continued the test despite clear signs of danger. The result was a massive explosion that released radioactive material across Europe. The disaster forced the evacuation of over 300,000 people and caused long-term health and environmental damage. It was not only a technical failure, but a human one, rooted in arrogance, secrecy, and pressure to meet unrealistic safety claims. Ignoring early warnings about COVID-19. In late 2019 and early 2020, public health officials around the world began receiving reports of a mysterious respiratory illness spreading in Wuhan, China. Some scientists raised early alarms about human-to-human transmission and urged immediate border controls and testing protocols. But many governments delayed action, underestimating the virus's spread and severity. These delays allowed COVID-19 to become a global pandemic, leading to millions of deaths, widespread lockdowns, and long-term economic damage. The Iraq WMD misjudgment. In the early 2000s, the U.S. government claimed that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction, using this as justification to invade in 2003. Intelligence agencies cited unreliable sources, and officials dismissed dissenting analysts who questioned the evidence. No WMDs were ever found. The war led to massive casualties, destabilized the region, and contributed to the rise of extremist groups like ISIS. The faulty intelligence and poor oversight highlighted the dangers of rushing to war based on politicized or unverified claims. Devaluing cybersecurity before major hacks. In the early 2000s, many corporations and governments treated cybersecurity as a low priority. Systems were poorly protected, passwords weak, and outdated software common. This neglect allowed major cyber attacks like the 2013 Target breach, the 2017 Equifax hack, and the global WannaCry ransomware attack to flourish. These breaches exposed personal data, disrupted critical infrastructure, and caused billions in losses. The collective underestimation of cyber threats revealed a costly blind spot in the digital age. Ignoring flood warnings in New Orleans. Before Hurricane Katrina hit in 2005, engineers and meteorologists had long warned about the vulnerability of New Orleans' levee system. Simulations and studies repeatedly showed that a major storm could breach the levees and flood the city. Yet critical upgrades were delayed due to budget constraints, bureaucratic gridlock, and underestimation of risk. When Katrina made landfall, the levees failed. Over 1,800 people died, and much of the city was submerged. Years of ignored warnings culminated in one of the worst natural disasters in U.S. history.